allegiance in our hearts, shed waters in our balls. The spirit and the flesh, the emotions that arrest. The cerebral will contest, propelling the unrest. Preachers and bandits with means underhanded. The teachers pedantic and lack understanding. So sweep out the sand with the broom in your hand. Stand up, make we burn Babylon. Guess I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you lurking, demons searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Cause I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you lurking, demons searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. With the semblance of a blaze, with gratitude and rage, we touch another page with delirious delight, impervious to light. This vitality and might encourages the flight. Preachers and bandits with means underhanded, the teachers pedantic and lack understanding. So sweep out the sand with the broom in your hand. Stand up, make we burn Babylon. Guess I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demons searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Guess I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demons searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. The world to you, but the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demons searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Cause I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demons searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Let me do a quick sound check. If you can give me a 1 in the chat if I am audible. Let me do my own local check here. Okay, the bubble. I see the bubble. The bubble signifies the bubble will be televised. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. 111. So, ladies and gentlemen, how's everybody doing? We're still in Los Angeles. It's been great. These are my old stomping grounds. It's the third day in the year of 2021. So it's my third stream here also. But what is this about? Well, I did a stream yesterday. On overcoming objections. And we created a mental model, a way of thinking about objection, a way of approaching objections, which is to say that it is not like picking locks and so on and so forth. It is more like melting wax with a flame. It is not jujitsu or an argument or a fight. We talked about the actual resistance and the wax that needs to be melted away, having to do basically with things that are more along the lines of inertia, not liking to change, and also not having a clear vision about the future.
a clear vision about the future, a clear imagination about the future that you're trying to sell them, because you are influencing and persuading people into a future story. You're a curator of stories, a projector of those stories into the future. And that's how you close the deal. That's how you overcome objections, at least. And it is involved in all kinds of persuasion. In other words, being able to paint the picture, use the imagination of your interlocutors, the people you're trying to influence and persuade, communicate, exchange, interact. We are social mammals after all. And someone asked, okay, this was a stream yesterday, good stream, if I may say, ladies and gentlemen. And somebody asked the question they asked in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. And shout out to the chat, by the way. And apologies for the delayed reading of the chat, so on and so forth, because of the road game with the one laptop, so on and so forth. But shout out to Doug in the house, Felicia Nisa in the house, Bob Cruz in the house. Well, someone asked this question here. Let me see. I think I should just share it then. Let me share the question that was asked. How are you doing, ladies and gentlemen? No heat, no smoke, no judgment. Shout out to Chaos Rain in the house. Shout out to Brandon in the house. So, this question was asked here. And let me see on my screen. I believe I am adequately sharing that. The question was asked, and again, we were talking about overcoming objections. We are in Storyville, okay? We are in Storyville, ladies and gentlemen, and we are weaving dreams. In other words, we are communicating, influencing, persuading. And we're talking about overcoming objections in that land, melting the wax of objections away, using imagination, storyline, painting a clear future in which they are winning, a clear future in which they are winning, they're where they want to be, and also they have the product that you're trying to sell them. So you're not selling them a product, you're selling them a future. A clear future, a clear path that the product is a part of, an integral part of. And somebody asked a question, and this represents a question that comes up, generally speaking, when you talk about persuasion. Someone asked, what they did was they rubbed their hands together like this. And again, no RT. This is all in good fun. Well, they rubbed their hands together and they said, well, I wonder if these techniques can be used on the women. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me check the chat. Can I get a 1 in the chat if we now understand the realm that we're going? Basically, we're trying to increase competence in a particular aesthetic pursuit, okay? That's how we're going to frame it. We're in Storyville. And we're talking about, in a way that'd be interesting to the algorithm, we're talking about talking dirty in Storyville, if one were to put it in a crazy little box. But the use of imagination, an integral part in the sensual and aesthetic aspects of intimate relationships. So, how are we going to treat this? Okay. Well, basically, let's do it like this. You got meat and potatoes. Okay. You got meat and potatoes. I don't know how you got your meat and potatoes. Could have fallen off a truck. You could have bought it with your stimulus check. You could have gotten it from Walmart, Target. You could have gone to the Whole Foods across the street and got your meat and potatoes. But point is, you can cook your meat and potatoes just boiling it together, both of them, one big pot filled with water and some salt, and just eating it like that. Or maybe you can separate them and treat them better, right? Get a higher level of treatment and cookery into your meat and potatoes. Or you can go all the way and make the perfect lamb roast with the perfect scalloped potatoes paired with the perfect Chianti. And you have a great dinner, one for the storybooks. Okay. So there are many ways to have meat and potatoes, is what I'm trying to say, ladies and gentlemen. But there are better and better ways. It is better to have that great party with the roast and the perfect wine than just plain boiling it all together in one big pot. There is an aesthetic dimension of improvement there, ladies and gentlemen. And the question that was asked that I just shared, right? It is representative. It does come up, as I mentioned earlier. So, using her imagination, which is also an aesthetic pursuit similar to the meat and potatoes. And by the way, we don't care how you got your meat and potatoes, by the way. So, and the analogy continues because the particulars of the circumstances, right? She may be your wife, your girlfriend, maybe long-term, short-term relationship, hook up. You're out there in wherever tricking, I don't know. But the point is, the aesthetic pursuit of using her imagination has better and better and better ways of going about it. And we're talking about improvement, or shall we say competency. Let's just say the word competency in this regard, because it always comes up in Storyville. Brandon, yeah. You know, we gotta keep some humor. Okay? We gotta keep some humor in this. The first thing to recognize, okay? The first thing to recognize is we're talking about using an already existing machinery which does all the work, which should do all the work. We're talking about putting the key in the ignition of a vehicle that has its own internal logic and that is supposed to do the work. You're not going to go in there and try to be sparking each spark plug, ladies and gentlemen, and moving the axle yourself, so on and so forth. This is about using the machinery that should be doing the work, the machinery of her imagination. Ladies and gentlemen, as Dr. Thunder says, and as pinned to the top, let's get the likes up. And I don't think I have formally introduced myself in the show. Well, my apologies. My name is Ike Okiamin. I'm your host. And over here, we talk about being and doing better, that is, with a strong emphasis on doing. And what are we doing today? Today, we are talking about competency in a particular aesthetic regard. Okay? Because I think a lot of men are in a state of unconscious incompetence in this regard. Because, for example, there may be this lady that thinks her meat and potatoes are great, but it doesn't pan out there, like the aesthetics, the taste, the texture, the smell, the presentation, aesthetics having to do with the senses doesn't quite add up. It is not that party we imagined earlier. It's closer to the boiled meat and potato. So, trying to get out of the unconscious incompetence, go into conscious incompetence, and then go to conscious competence. And then the peak of the pyramid is unconscious incompetence. You're in the zone, you're watching yourself make the moves, that kind of a thing. I just kind of described the typical pyramid for any kind of pursuit. But ladies and gentlemen, that is the landscape. So how are we doing? Let me go ahead and see if I can share something else, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you for liking the stream as you come in. Okay, if you guys can get the likes up, that will be greatly appreciated, ladies and gentlemen. I hope everyone is having a great 2021 so far. So far, so good for me. All right. So we're talking dirty in Storyville. Indeed. It is indeed a question of less is more, ladies and gentlemen. Just like I say, for example, if I were to tell you, hey, imagine yourself on the top of a skyscraper in broad daylight. Each person imagines a different skyscraper, a different skyline. Maybe their skyline in broad daylight has clouds. Maybe it's just a pure blue sky. Maybe you see the sun, maybe you don't see the sun. Some people might even focus more on the feeling of being on a skyscraper. Some people focus on the building, some people focus on the sky. But everyone has their own individual picture that they imagine as a result of me prompting it. In any kind of persuasion, it's always better to use people's imagination. That is why it says using her imagination. And that's why I also said it is something that has an internal logic. And the first thing we're going to note here is that, hey, gentlemen, that is very funny. So, no, sorry, I'm reading the comment. Reading the comment. Reading the comment, working the algorithm, ladies and gentlemen. Let me go ahead and take this off and let's get into certain meat and potatoes questions. Ladies and gentlemen, are we ready? How are we doing tonight? We are doing just fine. So we have given enough of a preamble given enough of a lay of the land, if you will. And basically, first thing that needs to be noted is okay, her imagination does all the work for you. When it comes to using your words in this particular aesthetic pursuit, using your words to inspire sensuality in her imagination, understanding and recognizing that basically her imagination, first and foremost, knows things that you can never know, cannot know: insecurities, kinks, history, memories. It has an internal logic of its own. Again, this is more akin to going to a car and turning the car on. And what's nice and why I decided to address this upfrontly, if you will, given the fact that I got the comments, is also because in this particular narrow gap, talking about this particular use of imagination is akin, it's a great way to kill two birds with one stone, okay? Because it's akin to all the other kinds of influencing, persuasion, being the dream weaver out there in Storyville, painting a future, curating a story, getting the buy-in on the story. So we're just understanding the why. Why do we use it, right? Why are we having a use model? Well, it's because you don't have power in this realm. It's not like a bicycle, it's more like a car. It has a lot of things that it is doing that you don't have to know anything about, perhaps cannot know anything about. And your job is to use the car. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, kind of building it as I'm flying it in the sense that I'm having this conversation also as a test of an algorithm, an algorithmic test. And the language is interesting to me. But let me get a one in the chat if basically we're making sense so far, right? If we're making sense so far vis-a-vis her imagination knows things you cannot know. It is there to do the work, the whole vehicle analogy. Okay. If that at least makes sense, then that is the basis for the whole approach, because the whole approach is about less is more, painting a sketch, not filling it in, and so on and so on and so on. Ladies and gentlemen in the house tonight, ladies and gentlemen in the house tonight, how y'all doing? How is everybody this evening? Indeed. Brandon Sanders says, yes, plant the seed, she'll grow it. But we're going to get into the particulars because over here, ladies and gentlemen, we are about actionable, intuitive, simple, measurable. We go in and we find some kind of a mechanism, okay? We're going to come out of here with a system. That's how we roll. And getting aside, but basically because that's what we do over here. Mastery of subjective consciousness, influencing, persuasion, Storyville, understanding narratives, imaginations. Yes, 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 ladies and gentlemen. So I got ones in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm just going to press on here. I'm going to go ahead since we understand the basis. Guys are wilding out in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. Wilding out in the chat. So, given the landscape and then understanding, what is the less is more approach? I would say this: you're trying to paint a sketch, and we'll go into this sketch painting, and we'll also go into the potential creating aspect. Okay. It is an active activity. It is an active solicitation of her imagination. It is not a passive thing, and this should be clear. And this is a point of view coming from a particular background. And the point of view is that seduction is more of a feminine thing. So this is not a and seduction is more of a passive, perhaps more complex, and at the same time subtle, which tends to be the case, type of activity. The eliciting of the participation of her imagination is a more active coaxing. But you cannot paint. The real discipline here is not painting on the canvas, is knowing how to coax a painting, as I said, with a sketch, how to create a potential, almost like a well that draws someone in with the words without giving the details, because you don't know the details. This is not some kind of equation you could figure out if you tried even. And that's why I pre-qualify this as a aesthetic activity. Obviously, it has to do with sensuality and the aesthetic pursuits, if you will. So we're keeping it light. So drawing an outline, you know, drawing an outline, setting at least a scene. If you were to say something like, for example, out of the blue, into a particular corner, tangential to the conversation, whatever it may be, well, you know I won't be able to control myself. That is almost a creating a potential kind of thing. But basically, you're trying to plant the seed, right? But we get granular over here. We understand mechanisms over here. We don't, because otherwise it's still just a cliche or still just everything that everyone knows. But the creating of that potential, this tension to elicit a response, and then the asking of questions as probing. Simply by saying something like, for example, another example perhaps that could be, in the right way, in the right tone, and so on and so forth, which none of this is about. It's not about tonality and all that other stuff. Now we're talking about how to paint the outline to begin to coax the feeling in from her imagination. Just to start here. Just for fun. Because it is fun. Because there are better and less better ways of handling those meat and potatoes we talked about. Right? So, if I were to say, well, you know what I'd rather be doing. And over here, we're trying to paint the structure and find the handles. And that's why we said we don't care about where you got your meat and potatoes or the particular context or what you would or should or whatever the situation might be. But it's the skeleton, the formula with a good enough foundational structure to understand the roadmap, ladies and gentlemen, the roadmap of using her imagination, right? And then when I say ask questions and repeat what is stated, this is a very tactical thing here at this point. So again, you have initiated, you have put a paper on the table and kind of put a pen on the table by making the statement such as we just made. A vague allusion to some kind of a potential or a painting of a scene. The what I'd rather be doing or where I'd rather be kind of thing versus the I won't be able to control myself. Well, I hope you're ready to deal with that. Those two are different in terms of one is more like a creating a tension, the other one is more like painting, but they are elicitations, one more of feelings in the body and the other more of images in the head and so on and so forth. Okay. But the asking of the question, just like yesterday when we were talking about overcoming objections in general, and this is not about some kind of a negotiation, right? But the same kind of use of imagination, because that is where a lot of communication is going on, still applies. So the asking of the question, or even if the question is rhetorical and only for effect, like when I said, for example, well, I hope you're ready to deal with that or handle that or something like that, then that is sending the ball back, a volley, because it's an emotional exchange where you're trying not to paint on the canvas with your words because that's not the best way to go about doing it. And that is a misunderstanding of the vehicle, right? It is an automobile. It does most of the work, right? It is not like a bicycle. So, and then the repeating of the responses, as we said, as we've said in other videos, like a way of creating a volley in a conversation after you have said these things that has put certain imaginings in her mind. Like if you were to say the whole thing about not being able to control yourself, and she goes, "Oh, really?" You simply repeat, "Really?" Because that kind of a repetition, again, it's a perfect return shows that you listened. In other words, that repeating of the last phrase of anything somebody tells you. Blah, 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 blah. And I use the white cup. And then you say, you use the white cup. And then they go, blah, 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 blah. It's a great way of getting people to fill in information, getting them to flow. Okay. It's the coaxing act that is the whole tactical part of this. Again, the not going to that canvas and start painting, but rather elicit a painting. T21, my apologies for the laptop control meaning my reading of super chats, my switching between screens, my sharing, and so on and so forth will not be where it needs to be. But I'll be back soon. I'll be back to home base. And that will be better. That will be better, ladies and gentlemen. So, as we know here, there are feelings in the body and then there's image and talk in the head. Okay. But it's all the same kind of subjective consciousness landscape. You got to master your own to be able to be a good dream weaver in someone else's feeling, image, and talk landscape. So it all goes hand in hand. Many of the things that we talk about, that I've talked about so far, that we've discussed, that we've hypothesized about, all find a nexus point here. Yes, because we're talking dirty in Storyville. Shout out to the unspecialist. Shout out to practitioner. Okay. So apologies, always the case. My road game will improve and I will have the several screens and I'll be able to look at Shozan talking and also me being able to share. But I'm going to go back now. And since we have established a certain baseline, there are better ways, ladies and gentlemen, of having the meat and potatoes. There's improvement along an aesthetic direction, a direction of sensuality. With the meat and potatoes, it's the taste and the texture and the smell. And yes, over here too, in using her imagination, it's still all about the taste and the texture and the. So understanding that the main principle here is light touch, expert touch, understanding what you're doing touch. With the premise that this is a machine with a logic of its own that knows things that you cannot ever possibly even know about. Therefore, the less is more approach is the first principle that needs to be stated. And we talked about how to coax, create a potential, draw a sketch, put the paper on the table, and then ways of repeating what is said asking questions, so on and so forth. We're all intelligent people over here. We can fill in the gaps, but we're trying to get to a structural level, a place where we can understand fundamentally, foundationally, same word, some kind of a theory, some kind of a working theory about this whole thing. Okay? And it's not rocket science. Okay? I think it's fairly intuitive, ladies and gentlemen. So, I mentioned that this is more of an active thing. Seduction is more of a feminine strength. Seduction, which is more of a pulling in. The eliciting of her imagination is more active, but requires more surgical action. In other words, doing it wrong is going in there and painting on the canvas. Doing it wrong is going in there and filling in details. You don't understand how the machine works. You need to find the key, the fob, or whatever, push the button, turn the lever. And we're going to talk now about brevity, okay? Just like in marketing, just like want to get away, ba-da-ba-ba-ba, I'm loving it, all that kind of stuff, okay? Brevity is key. And the boldness in terms of the direction is key because these things are simpler to understand. Well, brevity is the soul of wit, and wit is an important aspect of this whole thing. And all these things can be improved upon. You can always get better at serving meat and potatoes. So, stating intentions and apologies for typos. Stating intentions, saying rather directly in a very short way what you would rather be doing right now. What you would do about her dress, for example. Something like that. And then you continue with the repeating what the response is and asking some basic rhetorical kinds of questions. Because the effect you're trying to get is the effect of now she's getting into her imagination. You want to be outside, the dream weaver, ever so gently maneuvering. Ladies and gentlemen, so this is the brevity part. Because we talked about already the basic concept and the fact that simplicity or less is more, right, is the key. Create a sketch, create a potential, some kind of a tension, an emotional tension, a double, some kind of innuendo. Create some kind of a thing in that regard, right? And the whole point here is that you get to get better at serving this dish, going for this particular aesthetic pursuit in the same way that you could get better in anything. In other words, you simply think, practice, use, right? That's why this is not about some specifics. This is okay. Go practice how you could open up a canvas. How do you present the canvas? Okay. We already talked about that, like in the less is more aspect, and I gave some simple examples, but it's not really about the examples. It's okay. I can go, you can go, Young Swift can go, Bob Cruz can go. Shout out to the chat. All right. The Unspecialist can go. We can all go back and look at the drawing board and be like, what's a good way of opening up that canvas? Asking those questions, repeating the responses to see if the volley of the tennis ball keeps going. And when the volley stops, that's when you bring out your ball and you serve it. But what you want to do is repeat what the person is saying for the most part. Okay. And as I mentioned before, that is a key tactical aspect of this whole operation. All right. So that's what I just talked about, the asking questions, so on and so forth. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my channel. My name is Ike Ogiamian. I am your host. Over here, we talk about being better and doing better. Today, what are we doing today? We're trying to awaken from our unconscious incompetence in a particular aesthetic endeavor. We should at least know that we could improve in the meat and potatoes and stop having it so blandly. Or thinking that you really have anything to do with it rather than the meat and potato just shining. The meat and potatoes are doing all the work. You just got to do some curating. Same thing applies here, ladies and gentlemen, using her imagination. Imaginations. Ladies and gentlemen, so an important and very key part of this is also the learning aspect. Okay. Because, like any skill, the perfecting of your chicken breast fillet that is always perfectly moist, or your poached lobster tail, with the kale. The perfection of that whole art takes learning. So there's some learning and some pivoting, and then you're going to have certain landscapes. What I mean by this, you're going to have certain storylines, okay? You're going to have certain storylines. So there may be a storyline that has to do with something that's maybe more jocular. It's in the landscape of, asking how Emily is doing, and Emily is the nickname of a certain body part, for example. It could be in the whole nickname slash, again, through experience and laying out masterfully the canvas and seeing what's painted on it. These particular storylines will form, and it can be put in categories. Okay. This one is kind of more like a fantasy nickname happy category. And then there's probably some other more aggressive categories, right? In this landscape, you want to be able to have several plays. Am I making sense? Let me get a one in the chat if we're still tracking here, okay? Several plays from several canvases, which you have elicited, and using basic techniques, watched her fill in. And that you need to have several plot lines going, several characters, several plays, storylines that you're trying using. I think the reason for that is both manifold but also self-explanatory. Ladies and gentlemen, how's everybody doing Big Mad in the house. How are you doing, Big Mad? Brandon in the house. Born again simp in the house. Great names in the house. Some heavy hitters. So, so. Yes, yes, yes. Shout out to one and all. All right. So you got to have certain storylines, gentlemen. You got to have these storylines. You got to have these characters. Okay. If we may, because we need to be quite thorough, right? We want to at least say why, right? The first, but even though the reasons are trivial, the first trivial reason is you're trying to excite. Okay. It's an excitation thing. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about whales. Okay. Pulling in, like gravity pulling you down to the center of the earth, or the charge being pulled from positive to negative pole, that kind of a thing. We're trying to create that potential, that tension. And in order to do that, you have to come with a slightly different angle, a slightly different aspect in order to get the novelty thing, which is key because this part cannot be ignored. Unless you're just going and practicing your arts on a different her every time, then you're going to need to have several storylines going, several characters, some screenplays that maybe have not be fully thought out yet, other ones that are reliable, tried and true. you know, it's like your tried and true DC movies. But having a number of these, again, for the overcoming of novelty, number one, but number two, so that you are more equipped to be able to handle different situations. Because the playful scenario, for example, that playful fantasy nicknaming kind of storyline is amenable to certain situations, certain circumstances, and so on and so forth. That you want to be more versatile. Versatility, ladies and gentlemen, is the second reason why you need these storylines. And the third reason I would say is a nice, simple, empirical one: testing. You want to test different landscapes, bump them against each other, trial and error, expand your repertoire, have your go-tos, your go-to ways of opening the canvas, your go-to ways of creating the tension, the go-to ways of asking the rhetorical questions and coaxing the visual. And once you have the vision, okay, once you have certain anchors, maybe she filled it in by how, you know, you were going to break down the door of that bedroom with the red sheets, whatever it may be. Now you have an anchor. You have a thing that you can use. It's almost like a spell. It's like, I got one spell. In other words, whenever you can get the particulars about the imaginings of somebody, take, for example, a skyscraper. I told you guys to imagine yourselves at a skyscraper at the very top at high noon. And we all have our skyscraper. And if you heard me before when I said that, and if you did imagine the skyscraper, that same skyscraper came to mind, right? So that skyscraper now is almost like a little hook that I have in your mind. Let me get a one in the chat if this particular thing, which I just explained and I'm about to explain again, makes sense. Okay. Basically, You want to use the person's imagination. You want them to have their particular individual thing that they put in their minds. Let them fill in the detail. That becomes a little handle now that you can refer to and use in the dance, in the play. Shout out to Snuggles in the house. She sells seashells by the seashore, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in Storyville, that kind of a thing. 2 videos ago, closing deals, that kind of a thing. Last stream, using her imagination, gets asked indirectly or in a certain way whenever persuasion conversations happen. I wonder if I can use that on the women's, we say. Well, having a simple rubric, having a simple understanding, having a simple framework helps. It's the framework of eliciting the participation of the imagination of the party being communicated with. You elicit the imagination, they create certain scenes for you, certain gems, certain spells. And then you take that and then you use it. I can take that skyscraper now and I can build things around it. I can go on a journey with you around your individual skyscraper that you imagined when I elicited the participation of your imagination, when I asked you to imagine yourself in a skyscraper. So these things can be literally used, literally asking the imagination or the setting, right? And then having the person fill in the details, finding out the details so that you can learn and include them into storylines that you have several groups of. Because you're a psychopath like me or something. I don't know. Or maybe you could chill about it and not be so crazy. God, Ike, jeez. Excellent sparkling water and excellent latte. Ladies and gentlemen, let me go ahead and show, because my man Snuggles deserves his super chat shown on the screen. And I hope I did not miss any other ones. Of course I did, because shout out, shout out, shout out, shout out. Thank you, thank you, thank you very much for the $50. That's you are too kind, sir. You are too kind. And also shout out to Snuggles in the house. Shout out to Jonathan for the $50 super chat. And let me see what else I've been missing. And my apologies. My apologies, ladies and gentlemen. What else are you guys talking about over here? What else are you guys talking about? So, I think we have an understanding. I think we have a basis. I think we have an analogy, at least. I think we have a handle. That's all we need is a handle. That's all we need is a handle. And the thing about this is, just like in any other form of persuasion, you use directness. Again, this is more of an active thing. This is not passive. It is not what you would traditionally consider seduction, which I think is not, as men, our strong suit. A woman is seductive. So, point is, using that brevity, which was the second point, the brevity and the boldness of stating intentions, right? That creates that potential, that tension that you then let them resolve. And that's this point here. It says, put sex on the table. What does that mean? In other words, because you're nuts, you're going to figure out just ways, entry points, could be innuendos, or it could be, again, the whole lines that you have because you've thought about, bold brevity. I can go into my bold brevity file and I can prepare that. And I have some things and I have some storylines, blah, blah, blah. So when you put it on the table, it doesn't necessarily mean the conversation is just going to go in that direction. But once you bring out the canvas, it is now there. Just like people say, when you say things, you can't take it back, right? That is true, but it's also obviously true within the context of just a single conversation that is going on right here, right now, while you're eliciting and using her imagination. In that particular conversation, anything that is brought up is right there. It is not part of the furniture of the conversation. And if you bring it up and then the simple volley, no go, and then it goes around and it goes to other places, it is still on the table and it will be revisited. In other words, the last thing I like to say, or something that I like to add at this point, is that the ability to move backwards, okay, to back out and recircle is the difference between the top 90%, and then, like the top 10% and the top 5% of, let's say, people whom are doing any kind of negotiation, persuasion, influencing, so on and so forth. But the ability to back up, recircle, and reattack, back up, go back to a point where communication broke down, or understand the furniture of the conversation such that you can go back and pick up, as we say, right? Pick up another thread in the tapestry, one which you have laid there previously, because you're crazy. As we said, yes, we are talking about competency, going from this unconscious incompetence to at least conscious incompetence. And having a framework and having a basis and an understanding that is also part of tried and true and tested modes of operation in the land of persuasion, storytelling, curating stories, painting a future, securing the deal, ladies and gentlemen. That's the whole thing about putting it on the table. All right. Put it on the table. uh, Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you guys are having a good time, because I'm definitely having a good time out here with this particular topic, treated in this particular way, having had the impetus for it based on people literally asking in the chat. And I think that it is a good foil, ladies and gentlemen, a good nexus point, understanding how the imagination works, because we refer to it, whether when we talk about closing the deal, asking for the sale, the 5 stages of buying, overcoming objections, all that kind of stuff, the soft skills, those things that are needed for any kind of leadership, influence, so on and so forth, growth. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to mention that if it was not obvious, that this is an art analogized, and that your desire to even participate in, you know, that particular lamb roast made in that particular way, paired with that particular wine, is highly subjective. And then the method, and then the actual act, what is being asked, okay, is a whole creative kind of a thing. A creative dance, coaxing imagination, curating that imagination, and so on and so forth. In other words, this is by no means scientific claims, but I think that I have built enough intuition pumps for you to see the structure, the approach, the rationale behind it. So I said you don't know what the machinery is and you don't know where it's going to go or what it's going to do. And that's not what you're there to do. You're there to wave your magic wand around and see what happens. Ladies, understand. Indeed. So while I do this summary, let me do this. I'm going to open up the panel after I see what else we're doing over here. Okay? After I see what else we're doing over here, I'm going to ask to see if any. Shout out to Dr. Thunder in the house. Thank you very much for always holding it down. Shout out to LA Style 24 for the $5 super chat. Much appreciated, ladies and gentlemen. Join the stream here. We're musing about meat and potatoes, an aesthetic pursuit, eliciting sensuality, the imagination aspect of it. And we described a particular game that involves the eliciting of the participation of the imagination. Understanding that the imagination knows things you do not know, that it has a whole rationale that you cannot know or understand, nor need to know, nor need to understand at all. In order to say what you need to say. So shout out, ladies and gentlemen. Shout out. Let's see what we got here. This is a screen share. This is a screen share. Turn those off. So, questions, comments, concerns, musings of your own, disagreements, corrections, combatants are welcome. All right. Will anyone join the stream? So, made a stream yesterday about getting over objections. Someone asked, as someone usually always asks when we're talking about persuasion and mastery of subjective consciousness as well. Someone asked, I wonder if I could use that on women. And because of for obvious reasons, they would ask that. And a big part of the whole methodology is about using people's imaginations, understanding the imagination. Sales is not a 100% game, obviously. It's like, but understanding that people are emotional, understanding what you can do and what you cannot do. For example, understanding that you cannot compete with her imagination. You cannot compete. It's the one that's going to do what it needs to do. But if you like to make a shank of lamb in a particular way, and you would like to play this again aesthetic game, then it's the same simple principles of utilization, eliciting the participation, putting in little markers, drawing out in an active way, not a passive way. Ladies and gentlemen, let us go ahead and populate the panel, the room. How are you guys doing, ladies and gentlemen? How is everybody doing? Go ahead and introduce yourself, starting with the top, assuming that you are looking at the screen, and going down to the bottom.
I believe the top would be me. What's up, brother Ike?
What is up? Is that you, Jonathan, or who are you?
This is Jonathan. I'm enjoying this topic.
Okay, so, and below Jonathan, who do we have there? Just want to get a quick view of the room.
That must be me. I am Isoji Noir.
Interesting.
Is that Kaizo?
I was about to say that. But below Message Noir, okay, who do we have?
How you doing? This is Showzon.
Showzon in the house. Okay, cool. So, what do you have to say about this? You came on the panel. Let's start with Jonathan. If you want to give a quick kind of a preamble as to, well, why you found it interesting, some point of disagreement, some point of contention, some other thing that people always want to seem to talk about. Because, as I said, I don't care how you got your meat and potatoes, but whenever you talk about meat and potatoes, people always want to talk about all the surrounding things about, well, the market for meat and potatoes is this, and the potatoes are overpriced, and how about when, the meat's going to tear you out the frame? And it's like, I don't care how you happened upon the meat and potatoes. Okay, we're just talking about how we're gonna roast it, ladies and gentlemen. So, Jonathan, go ahead. What do you have to say?
Sure. So I'm approaching this as a combatant. I'm just playing. I'm just playing. So I just wanted to add one thing that I noticed you didn't. I think you kind of alluded to it maybe, but you didn't touch on it. Is, in my opinion, the element of touch as well, right? So the element of touch. So I'm no player or anything, but I I find that the element of touch is actually quite important, right? So like, in terms of like communicating certain things just by, like sometimes you watch somebody like, you're at a restaurant or something and you watch people on dates and whatnot, and they're sitting apart from each other, and they may be having a stimulating conversation, but I personally have found that, like, like whenever I go on dates, for example, I on purpose never sit across from the, from the lady I'm with. So, a lot of times I'll choose to sit at the bar and sit next to her. And I think a big part of that is so that she's within reach. Obviously, you don't want to be a creep, right? So you want to make sure that when you get to that point where touch is involved, it actually is welcomed and it makes sense. But the point I'm making here is that I think a big part of this is basically, just touch, just really almost like, I'm not a woman, obviously, but I think a lot of times, you could see how it changes the way that the woman interacts with you. You know what I'm saying? When you start, when you hold her hand and you, anyway, so I don't want this to,
yeah,
but
okay.
Yeah.
Definitely, yes. It is something that I purposely try to tease out this particular thing when I say using her imagination. In other words, it's almost like how to use a sous vide to cook, the perfect rack of lamb or something. It's like, it's not about many other things that need to be done as well, right? So it's like, how do you use her imagination? By using the words. In other words, that whether you do the touch stuff or not, all the other stuff that you do aside, okay, this is simply about that word thing, which is important. It's a particular game. When I say important, I mean you can choose to do it or not, right? Some people take, shall I say, talking dirty to there's different gradation styles, flavors, and so on and so forth of it. But in that whole play, that intimate play between men and women, there is a big aspect of what goes on that has to do with her imagination in particular, not so much yours, but and how you can play that game, So, but definitely, yes, the touch in communication, I mean, that opens up because, and it starts with you, first of all, you have to be literally comfortable, like your vibrations are comfortable in order for that touch to happen. And that's not a complicated thing. We talk over here about mastery of subjective consciousness, meditation, and so on and so forth. So, whatever, no big deal. Mr. Misogynoir, what do you have to say about this?
I guess what I like to say is that I take on different roles depending on the kind of animal that I'm trying to hunt. I don't put a blanket sort of even a metaphysics on it. So depending on the animal that I'm hunting, what I do is I figure out its patterns, like how it walks or runs, why does it run, or why does it move the way it moves. And once I figured out the initial sort of response of that particular creature, then I put on my kind of more game approach, which would be basically you figure out how it moves, and once you do figure out how it moves, then you can catch it, because then I'll give it a perfect example, right? So most people, when they're interacting with each other, they do it in a very blue-pilled manner, like the expectations and the stories and narratives that they've kind of developed across with each other within a specific game frame. So what I do is I break that narrative. I break it immediately, and I tease it out using things that will kind of make the subconscious want to know more. So I tease out that there's a greater whole to this, but I don't quite throw them in the deep end whereby I scare them away. So I just show them that there's something that they can't quite see. And also with listening skills, right? So like, I think I'm pretty decent at listening to people. So people tend to gravitate towards that. And then once you hook them onto it, you then remove it like a drug addict, right? You remove that particular thing that they've got accustomed to. Now they have the shakes at this point. And the point after they have the shakes, they come back for more. And at this point, you have them on their leash. And then now you're the one in control.
I see. So yeah, I knew, I knew this was inevitable as well, and that's why I'm laughing, because it's so. Mr. Shozan, what do you have to say, sir?
How you doing? I'm trying to think of a way I can put this, because we're doing very good with the analogies, keeping it YouTube safe. So I'm trying to think the best way to state my main thought. You know what I'm saying? The best way I can really put it is like martial arts. Okay, if someone's better at the wrestling or the ground game, the grappling side, right? There's certain tendencies, you know what I mean? Like there's certain tendencies they're gonna have that strikers don't have. Or for instance, even if you just take boxing by itself, because that's very universal for everybody, all cultures, right? If you have someone, for instance, Mike Tyson and Ali, right? They're both quick, they both have different forms of power, but Mike Tyson was very in your face. He's what's called an inside boxer. From my knowledge, different boxing people may be, but from my knowledge, inside boxer is very much inside. Muhammad Ali, a lot of times, would be more on the outside, bobbing and weaving away. I want to say it like this. As a guy that's like of mixed race and mixed cultures between black and white, just to simplify it, right? Mostly black, but still. Certain, like someone before me talked about breaking certain social norms or stereotypes. I don't want to confuse it with stereotypes. That's not what he meant. I found a lot of strength with just riding with those thoughts and riding with what the girl sees. So like not to whatever, but like a white girl, for instance, is going to see certain things in me and appreciate certain things in me that girls of other races may not. Not to say they may not like me, but they're going to see different elements. And so like, and try to, I don't know how to say it, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like there's certain sides that instead of trying to prove other sides, you just ride with it. You know what I mean? That makes sense.
Oh yes, 100%. I mean, I think that I refer to that as premise number one, and then continue to follow in that line. Premise number one being the machinery has a logic of its own that you have no business trying to understand, right? That's
Exactly.
not the whole point of this here, right? And therefore you're going to go, and that's why it's like, and that's why you must not, as I said, to follow up. And the whole point of all of this was coaxing the picture out, right? Because it's easy to just go there and try to paint your own silly drawing on stuff, but I don't think that's high level filleting. If you like to play that kind of a game, right? If I'm making sense. So, Shozan, would you say that you agree with the fact that there is an element definitely of you going where it goes and you basically paying attention?
Exactly. And you said it better than I did, because like there's a certain place they're going to go. Like when you say hi to a woman, right? Or you say hi to, to the machine, let's say, or you say hi to the machine. There's going to be certain positive points your style gets automatically. They're going to give you points automatically in certain areas. So instead of trying to prove this particular machine, but I'm also like this, like, no, leave that alone. Paint a big picture on exactly what that machine wants. You know what I mean? Give it the bestest picture of the picture it wants. You know what I'm saying? And just ride with that energy instead of trying to resist it. Sometimes as guys, we want to prove our ego in this way or the other, but like give the machine what it wants to hear about,
So one quick thing I wanted to add to that is
Okay.
this actually, I feel like this is a bit of maybe anecdotal. I guess it's reflective of like some of the things you mentioned, right? So in my personal life, one of the things that I found has been very helpful for me is the silence part. So in my so-called, let's say, simping days, I find that I used to yeah, probably my ex would probably even tell you this. Like I used to talk a lot, right? In the sense that like if I go out on a date or if I'm hanging out with a woman, like I would talk a lot or almost like feel the need to prove myself, right? Feel the need to make it clear who I am and why they should, take interest in me. And one of the things that I've been very intentional about is, nowadays is basically the less is more aspect, right? And I'm very intentional about this. And actually, I see it. I can tell that it's actually having an effect because now, I've had women tell me, you're such a mystery, or like they'll say things like that where it's like, I'm trying to figure you out. Like I can't even figure out what box to put you in or things like that. Whereas I feel like before, I would rarely hear something like that, right? Or probably never, because it would just be, I'm kind of putting it all on the table because I want you to know. And so I think when you leave that air of mystery, it makes, and again, I don't know if this is a fact about women, but at least my experience, I find that they want to, it's like a challenge for them to want to figure you out, right? Like,
let me say something about that fact about women thing that you said, because there is a certain level of kind of autism, not to you, but in the way certain things are looked at, where it's like there's a basic intuition and understanding of what we're talking about, right? It's not some kind of, more so at least in this conversation, it's not some kind of thing where we're dependent on empirical evidence out there and psychological studies, plus whatever it may be, right? To figure out what kind of eliciting someone's imagination is like and what kind of, those things are more intuitive than not, right? So to try to categorize by saying, well, is it this particular kind of nature? And this, I think that leaves you open, or that leaves the whole argument open, even at least in your mind. It leaves the whole argument open to doubt and kind of ways of us dealing with it. But it's just like, no, it's a given. You don't have to prove whether or not it applies to women or women, what percentage of women. It's like, no, you're just making some basic intuitive sense.
Well, so the reason I like saying that is because, we live in a world now where people don't understand that. Obviously, there's nuance to everything. And, you see how people, like, they always say, they always want to be the not all police. So I just want to make sure that that I make that clear. But
no, women, I like that.
One other thing that I wanted to add too is, and I'm not sure if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but hey, it works for me. So one of the things I do a lot, I probably shouldn't mention this, but I do this a lot, and it actually works for me. Is I will basically make a decision for her, right? So in other words, like we go out on a date, and I'll be like, okay, so what are we doing at my spot later, right? And like I've already established that we're going to be at my spot later, and I find that actually works really well for me, which is interesting, right? Like in other words, like I think a lot of guys are more likely to try to figure out how to ask her to come over. Whereas like for me, I've already established that she's coming over. Now, obviously this sounds awful, maybe, I don't know, but she still has a choice to obviously not come, right? But it's just, I think women like that. Like I've found that women like that. They like when you kind of, because now she's wondering what is going to happen at this spot. And like, it's almost like she's trying to figure it out. Anyways, I just want to add that. Like, I find that this, I probably shouldn't have put that out there, but
no problem. Let me comment on what you said, and then I'll add Shozan I'll ask Shozan what he thinks about something. Yes, they like that, and also they do not like that. And this is just an aside, right? What I mean by they do not like that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, right? It just means you should be prepared to be assailed and assaulted for the things that are liked sometimes, even though they were liked at the time, or they're liked later on, or you get what I'm saying, right? So, and there's no kind of perfect gauge to kind of know. So Snuggles says something about war tactics, right? Let me mention something about archetypes, and then I'll ask you guys what you guys think about the comment there. When I say archetypes, I'm not trying to get to. So basically, the part of this conversation or this talk or that monologue that I had, where I was talking about different storylines. I said different storylines, different characters, so on and so forth. I think that was probably most clear and intuitive aspect of this whole thing. It's okay. Well, oh yeah, I get it. I get there are different kinds of play. Okay, so a good thing to guide you again in this particular thing, because I'm in my little narrow sphere here of doing this, using her imagination as a weapon of sensuality act, not talking about all the other things, not talking about how you took the plane off, how you met her, how you're flying the plane, maintaining that, or how you're going to land the plane, or nothing about that. It's almost like we're just talking about the second course of your 16-hour flight, the crackers, right? If what I'm saying makes sense. But basically, the whole point is you can use a character. Okay, let's say, for example, you were talking about, I typically do this or I don't do that. It's almost like there is a character in a play, and how would that character act? In other words, let's say, for example, it to be rather fundamentally true that a woman wants to look up to a man, or want a man she can look up to in many different dimensions, perhaps infinite of looking up to. But we're smart enough to gather some basic ones based on some basic facts. And you almost like you have this character, okay? And similar to what I said yesterday, you ask, okay, what would this person do? Okay. And if you get what I'm saying in the chat, concur or disagree also amongst the panelists as well, where it's like you're looking at yourself as a particular character and you're asking, well, what would this person do? And just like Jonathan says, Jonathan will say, well, this person would, lead, right? That kind of a thing. So that way you don't, because it's not like we're going around with this in the front of our head all the time. Like we got stuff to do. You're getting distracted and you're doing your books. But again, you got to remember that you got to get away from that mind of doing your spreadsheet on Excel and go a little bit more into Storyville when you want to play this particular aesthetic games. But now I'll ask, starting with Shozan and then to Kaiser, the misogynoir. What do you guys think about the comment here about, he said you guys are sounding pretty martial about how you go about, because, the hunting, for example, I think misogynoir started that whole thing. But Shozan, what do you have to say about what Snuggles has on the screen there?
Well, not to sound whatever, but I think that just being tactical and strategical, or that's not really a word, but being strategic feeds into our strength of being men, basically. And once again, that goes back to what we're saying earlier about when you say certain things, you have to say not all and everything like that. But in general, one thing I've learned is going with logic, going with the numbers of things is improving my life a lot more than when I was very flower childish. I was very, what's interesting, not to digress, but I remember I did a stream about the very equality versus the more, competitive type systems. And that really opened my eyes to how I really look at things and how I really look at things. Because like one thing I mentioned in the chat of that stream is doing martial arts and stuff. It's hard to be like, everyone should get a trophy when my whole point in martial arts is to be the guy getting the trophy. So like the truth is men being quote unquote war tactic like in things is what makes you make more money in Bitcoin. It's what makes you learn which type of bench press makes you actually gain more muscle. It's always looking at what's real and what's not and what actually works. Like what the good brother said earlier about like what they call it? Assuming the sale, right? Mentioning to the girl, like, okay, like when we go out on Friday or when we go to my place. That's like in sales where you say like, okay, what size of couch do you want if you're selling couches? You assume they already want it. And it's not a negative thing, it's positive, right? You assume that you're so great that you just want to know when they want to experience you more. You know what I'm saying? Your product is so good, it's like, of course you want the large size or whatever it is, whatever the situation is. You know what I mean? It's like handing someone a gold coin. The only question should be, do they want a coin or do they want the gold bar? Some people prefer the bar, so.
Got you. That's perfect. Yes, definitely. Let me ask you now, Kaizo.
Yeah.
What do you think about this martial aspect as Sir described it, the more, he said, being tactical and strategic and so on and so on.
Right. Okay, so I guess using war tactics, yeah, it's accurate. I mean, there's no fairness in love and war. That's a statement for a reason, because it's juxtaposed. It's the same thing. war and love are exactly the same thing, because you can't predict if you're going to win, and you can't predict how the game's going to be played, either within, in the sense of, whether there's actual love or not, etc. So so the thing here is, you always have to learn the system if you want to protect yourself, right? Again, everything depends on your axioms. Do you have an axiom of self-preservation, or is your axiom just winning, or is your axiom winning across time? For example, what the good brother said previously to me is he might just actually just embed himself into the narrative that she's already expecting, and then basically amplifying that imagination in her mind and then following suit, rather than being antagonistic in flow. Meanwhile, in my case, what I do is I do maximize that kind of expectation that she has. I may be a black male that she thinks has this kind of attitude and this attitude. I then do present that within limits, but then I break that. I break it. I break it enough when we're in social situations with certain people of her peers. Then she's like, okay, I can actually keep him longer than just for the aesthetics component. I can actually keep him because he's actually functionally implementable into this system that I'm actually creating. So I learn in real time based on.
Go on.
Right. So then I change and then implement all these new strategies in relation to how she's responding. So everything is always in real time. And the moment I realize that I'm winning, I always withdraw. That's the point where I withdraw, and then now she's basically going to be like, oh, by the way, I thought you're going to buy that house. I thought you're going to sell me that house. And then now I have all the power, and at this point, she's part of the roster, and that's it forever. Actually, I have like 3 or 4. It works every time.
All right, here comes Kaizo with the rotation. Ladies and gentlemen, okay, it is important for me to mention one thing that was said here, or that is implied with this. And it has to do also with the tactical thing, and then I'll ask you, Jonathan, what you think about what Snuggle said. But the idea that these things are not things that you talk about or ever make clear in any way whatsoever to her, whoever she might be, right? So it's kind of crazy that we're having the conversation on YouTube, because the whole premise of this whole thing, by the way, is that it is not that they don't know what's going on, right? That's the whole beauty of, and by the way, it's not like some kind of a secret or some kind of a crazy thing or something dark. That's the whole beauty of the art, right? When you're doing the thing, it's a performance. It is very much an emotional thing. It has to do a lot with these intuitions and so on and so forth. You don't want it to be like a up, down, left, right, right? Even though, but my contention is you should have a up, down, left, right mind, right? Which we kind of enumerated in terms of some aspects anyways, right? And for example, less is more, how to elicit and coax certain things, how to ask certain questions, how to have these phrases that you use, having certain storylines, blah, 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 so on and so forth. That definitely have that. But then in the moment, that's when you depend on another thing. And this other thing that you depend on goes to that whole touch aspect that was brought up by John. The other thing you depend on in the moment is your mastery of in other words, your mastery of the moment, your mastery of time, which means your mastery of your subjective consciousness. Whatever it is that's going on with you at any time, which I like to break down into feelings in the body, image in the head, and talk in the head, your ability to master that is then what keeps you in flow when you're actually doing the thing. It's what makes it such that it is not up, down, left, right, and so on and so forth. And these things need to be combined, blah, 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 right? And as I mentioned, that's if you want to participate, in this kind of a thing. So, and that's why I mentioned at some point, like if you're psycho like me, right, then maybe you go, because I go all the way down the line. Yeah, because I'm kind of crazy that way. And like, okay, well, why not? But Mr. Jonathan, what do you have to say about what Snuggles said here?
Well, first of all, I want to say, Mr. Kaizo, he sounds like a straight up academic. I know he's a PhD. No, so in all seriousness, here's the thing, right? At the end of the day, this ain't a Disney movie, right? Like this is, you know, it's the real world, and I think that's something that as men, like you have to come to that realization and take it for what it is. And so a big part of it is, you know, do you want to be successful or do you just want to, you know, fight for the, you know, the scraps? Like, and at least for me, I know, again, I've been that blue pill guy, you know, and I think I mentioned this to you in the previous stream that I was on. I was actually almost married. I was engaged. You know, I was envisioning that Disney. You know, no, seriously. I mean, this is not. I'm not joking. Actually, I really was envisioning that. You know, I'm gonna spend the rest of my life with this woman, and you know, she's my better half. I used to say, you know, shit like that, and it's like I went through that phase, and honestly, I feel like I'm proud. I'm glad I went through that and experienced what I experienced, because now I think it made me snap out of the whole, you know, just the movie aspect, the romantic, you know, everything is Disney way of looking at things. So yes, I guess I'm saying all this to say I wouldn't think of it like war, but I get the analogy, and if you know,
Can I ask you a question, Jonathan?
Sure.
Right. So, okay, I guess I get what Snuggles was saying. Snuggles is coming from the aspect of it should be natural. It should be fluid. It should be somewhat like both of you are not really knowing what's going on. It should be almost naive. And like you said, the problem is that everything, like you said, is there's consequences if you're going to think of things that way.
Well, here's the thing, right? The natural, what ends up being natural is what I feel is what you end up being. It's kind of like how do I articulate this? It's like if you grow up, for example, watching, you know, all these, whether it's Disney movies or, you know, romantic movies and whatnot, it shows you one way of things, and that one way of things is a nice guy strategy, right? And then so that becomes what you would consider natural, but really you've been trained that it's not. I don't know if it's really natural for real. It's what you've been trained to do, and so I think a big part of it is retraining yourself. And yes, sure, a big part of it is a performance. Like I used to be the guy, actually, this is a great point. I used to be the guy, my ex could tell you this. I used to be the guy who was like, you know, why are you guys playing games? You know, like when I would see my friends, you know, waiting, let's say a couple hours before they respond to somebody. Like, man, you just playing games and doing all that, right? But guess what? I used to be that guy saying that, right? But all those friends, like, you know, whether it's when they had a roster or whatever, it was working well for them, right? Meanwhile, I was the blue pill guy, and I'm doing who, you know, got the shit in the end, right? And now, you know, I'm not saying I wait hours or whatnot to respond to people, but my point is that when you start understanding that, hey, this is, you know, when somebody feels that you're always available, right? When they feel you're always available, they take you a little bit more for granted, right? Like understanding that it becomes less about the game you're playing and more understanding, okay, I should make myself less available. But it doesn't mean you're sitting around looking at a text message and not responding to it. It means you're actually doing shit for so that you're not always available, right? But so the point is, you know, is it performative to a certain extent? Sure, but it's also understanding. Listen, this is how a big part of it is just human nature. It's not necessarily even just female nature; it's human nature, a big part of it. But some of it is female nature. But it's understanding. Listen, this is the world we live in, and so if you want to be successful.
I think Mr. Jonathan cut off.
See, I agree, but the reason that I super push the tactic and war idea is because of, once again, another war idea, but the idea of an arms race, right? Women, and this is, I'm just saying this blankly, not a negative way, it's just true. Women are already kind of tactical in how they look at things. As soon as they meet a man, they're saying, okay, is he like this? Because then we can go on a trip like this. What does he do for a living so we can experience this? Even in the negative areas, yes, women will try and see if they can get a dinner or whatever. Like women are also tactical in how they go about it. So I think there's no shame in a man being tactical. It's just being tactical for maybe a, even for aesthetic reasons, like an honorable or whatever is your particular thing. Like I go with the honor thing. And I know that's just,
I guess the difference
aesthetic,
is,
but that's just what I do.
So maybe
Did I fall off? I fell off, didn't I?
Yeah,
you did.
I think the difference there, what you just mentioned, is between strategy and tactics. So yeah, they are tactical, but they're not strategic. Strategic is, I guess, what Jonathan was talking about, which is you're kind of going through it in a much longer distance. You're planning each event particularly, while tactical is just kind of dealing with whatever you have in front of you and doing choosing the best kind of positions from it.
Right. I think it's basically understanding. Listen, I want to be successful at this, right? Because what I was saying, I think I don't know where I cut off, but essentially what I was saying is that at the end of the day, right, what you don't do, there's another guy who's gonna do it, right? And so there's another guy who's gonna do it, and he's gonna be successful. And are you gonna just be that guy who's just upset and become an incel and they don't want me, or are you gonna actually understand, hey, this is what I need to do in order to have a better interaction with women, right? Have better interactions with women, and it doesn't mean playing games. It doesn't mean that's why I don't like necessarily think about it like war tactics, but I get the analogy. Like it just means understanding that and operating with that mindset that you need to be intentional. Essentially, you need to be intentional and not just basically moving kind of like with the flow and not really having any kind of strategy for anything and just kind of like whatever happens, because that doesn't work. At least in my experience, it doesn't work. Maybe it works for some people, but it doesn't work.
I see. So let me ask a question about the. Sorry, move my mic closer. A question about the worthwhileness of this, because I am putting it in a category of just kind of like aesthetics. That's why I'm using the meat and potatoes example. I'm like, well, you can be a foodie about it, or you could just be like, you know what? I boil my meat and potatoes together with some salt and I eat it right out the pot. So, where do you guys land in that range? Okay. Do you like to do, and again, we can keep it fairly broad, but in the kind of imagination space. Okay. I'm using the imagination space in a particular way here in terms of sensuality, if you will. But as you guys have said, you guys are doing it in many, it applies to many other things. In other words, I do believe, yes. Anyways, not to go too far with that, but what do you guys think, okay, about the worthwhileness of this particular pursuit, or how far do you guys go between just regular potatoes to foodie type? And let's start with Shozan.
Well, no BS. I was actually a chef for like 16 years. I'm done with the food industry now, but that might show my mentality a little bit. I've always been the type of person where wherever I did, and this actually made my parents mad about school, I was the type of person where in science, they'd cover different subjects per month or whatever it was, whatever marking period it was, whatever section of time. And if it was about dinosaurs, I get an A+ and they'd be happy. But if it's about something else, I get an F because I wouldn't want to do it. I say all this to say, if I'm going to go for a certain type of machine, I want the most best looking, but most high performance machine. I want to bring, but also the whole honor thing, raised with honor thing. I want to bring the best out of myself to the table. And in order to be the top percentage of any of those factors, it's going to take a certain level of tactics or whatever to be. Let me say like this. We always say the 80-10, 90-10. Well, if you want to be the top, let's say 10% and have like 10% body fat, just to keep it all numbers, right? In order to get the 10% body fat, at certain points, you're going to have to be, whether we're going to call it strategy or tactics or whichever way we want to whatever flavor icing we want to put on it, it's still putting your mind or your hard work to an extra level that other people aren't doing. You know what I'm saying? So I do agree with what they're saying. I just feel like the whole main objective of all of this is to think or act on a higher level. And bringing it back to putting an idea in her mind, you also want to put an idea in her mind that's of a higher level too. That's why you try and hit all of those senses, like how's she going to feel with you? I mean, what's she going to experience? So I just feel like it's good to put an extra punch behind all those levels,
Oh yeah. So definitely. So you are going on. You are a chef, and you're going on also on the foodie direction. And I'm going to dare to kind of say that there's probably a correlation between people who are into certain kinds of aesthetic pursuits and how it cuts across in all different aspects of their life, right? So yes, I strive to be the top 10%, top 5% hedonist in terms of all kinds of aesthetic things. I have no qualms with it whatsoever. So, Mr. Massager Noah, can you please, what do you think about, are you a basic meat and potatoes guy, or do you like to go all the way with your cooking?
I guess, I always try not to utilize the same frame for everything. So ultimately, it will depend on how I'm feeling. if I'm feeling like I'm in a mood to actually cook something that's extravagant or not. So ultimately, I wouldn't put like an exact premise on it. Like sometimes the other day I went out here, I made the nicest chapatis with jollof rice, with with all the best kind of flavorings out there, and I had a great time. I enjoyed that meal. I ate it up really nicely. But sometimes you just want a simple meal to satisfy the more carnal aspect of things, and that simple meal you kind of already know how to get it. You know how to set the premise. So you just kind of like a template. You copy pasta. If you're a businessman and you want to set up a company, simplest way is to get an Uber app, copy that Uber app into some other country that doesn't have that market filled in yet, and then you could set a simple company, rather than having to recreate my own app similar to Uber from scratch and try to figure out the unique aspects. So it does depend on what's the turnaround turnover. Am I in a hurry? Am I trying to create something long term for some kind of food-gasmic pleasure, or is it more kind of short term?
100%. So Jonathan, where do you stand on this? You're a chef like Shozan, and you like to have those extravagant dinner parties. You got to pair that roast with the perfect wines, and you're just a crazy wild person about it. Are you that, or are you just a bare boiled meat and potatoes guy?
I honestly think Kaiser just described me as well. So
I see. That is quite. So now let me ask this to close off, okay? Because I always try to. The whole point of this, and hopefully, because this is an exercise on many levels here, and and I'm sure you guys understand the game and meta games being played. But one simple one is just the algorithm game that we're playing, and our meat and potatoes, and our I forgot. You guys have been good about it and quite funny too. But let me ask a question, because things should be actionable and measurable, as I always like to say, and at least intuitive in terms of explanation. So I've tried to kind of say certain things about what should be done, and then also make certain connections, because I believe strongly in those connections. Again, to the whole point about physical touch, you need to that touch works just the same way as you don't even need to touch. Being ready to touch is perceptible, is what I'm saying. Obviously, touch is better, but being ready to touch is already perceptible in the sense that you can sense tension. And I don't know how it comes in. Maybe you're looking at their facial structure, whatever. But we all know that we can sense when someone is tense versus when someone's relaxed. So that aspect of you mastering your subjective consciousness, super key the whole way. Then I talked about the less is more, how you coax certain things, right? Are there any practical things that you guys can say? Again, if you could try to keep it general, and then I'll start from Kaizo because he's the PhD and he's the abstract guy here that can keep things general. And I've tried to give general landscape layout, the handles, what you can use. It's a machine, paint outside, okay, create potential, gravitational well, have them fall in, right? That kind of a thing. Any practical kind of things you could say about this imagination veil? Again, try to keep it within the bounds of
algorithms.
Yes, and also the particulars of the topic, in the sense that, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I guess what Jonathan said, especially is awareness. So that would be the first and most important thing, is that you have to be aware that you are living in Storyville, and that actually everything is ingrained with some kind of story attached to it, and there's nothing wrong with that awareness. A lot of times, some people get disillusioned at the facts rather than just accepting it. A simple abstraction is nihilism, right? Some people, that when they think, oh no, nothing really matters in an absolute manner, they get depressed. Or some people think, oh, nothing really matters. I can create my own reality or my own meaning from things. So I guess here it's about perspective. So accept reality for what it is, and know that we are living in a meta world with meta games, trying to hunt for specific kinds of foods. And and there are ways that are more successful yielding profits, and some are less yielding profits. And there's profits of different kinds. Sometimes you might want to have an NGO company whereby you just care about the love as opposed to the aesthetics component of the beauty of the profits. So sometimes you're more NGO, sometimes you're more capitalistic. But you have to be aware that each of these things are choices that you create at each particular moment. And this will then allow you to at least engage with your shadows. And the more you engage with your shadow, your ulterior self, and accept it, will actually prevent you from going into the dark side. Because there is a potential, unfortunately, if you engage in this sort of meta game, that you might, unfortunately, if you don't understand yourself, engage with potential evil. So it's actually good to be aware of it and then know the boundary limits, and then you'll be able to actualize yourself in the most appropriate manner.
I like that very much. I like that very much. I like you bringing in the dark side, because there is a dark side element to this, because there is a force, in this case, a force adjacent to what we're talking about, in this case, call it lust, let's say, which is a dark side type power. But, you know, you got to learn to understand all the games that surround those the Dionysian. Is it Dionysian or Dionysian? What would you say, Mr. Kaizo?
I'll say Dionysian, but
Dionysian. Okay. Our resident PhD says Dionysian, so I will go with Dionysian games. Ladies and gentlemen, Jonathan, okay, if any, practical things, right, about this using of her imagination? Any kinds of things that we can hold on to? What do you say?
Sure. So, as Kaiser mentioned, this basically the first thing is oh, I thought it looked like I dropped off. Okay, sorry. So the first thing is definitely the awareness, absolutely. Because I think that's, in fact, I think I saw a comment by Dr. Thunder. I'm on StreamYard now, but where he mentioned the bad thing about blue pill is when you're blue pill, you don't know you're blue pill, right? So I think it's basically just being aware. Once you become aware of just what things are and why they're the way they are, et cetera, just understanding that and being okay with it and learning how to capitalize on that, right? So rather than, in other words, don't become an incel. Please do not become an incel. Just learn to capitalize on it. Learn to use it to your advantage, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, at least for myself, is remain genuine. Don't change yourself per se, right? Like just because you're capitalizing on your awareness, don't change yourself. Remain. I remain true to myself regardless of what environment I'm in and who I'm interacting with. That's very important to me. But I find that when you are genuine, even if it's not on purpose, that communicates, right? That's something that I think communicates well to people. Like people can tell when you're full of it versus when, okay, this is how this guy is, this is who he is, right? Yep. And I think that's a very important thing, and I do think that actually plays a part in just how she imagines you, right? Like especially if she's getting to know you, etc. Another aspect, this might sound a bit narcissistic, but is make it about you, right? Make it about you and focus on you. So in other words, I'll give you a practical example, right? A practical example is when I go out on dates, I will interact with, like if I'm at a restaurant, especially like I said, a lot of times I like sitting at the bar because I'm next to her. If there's another woman that comes in or a group of women, they come in as friends, I will start conversation with them, right? I'll engage them, right? And it seems to me that women are not used to that, right? Because a lot of times, a guy makes her the world, right? The guy makes her the center of attention, and he focuses on her the entire time. And so a lot of times, like I will do this, and then I'll actually see how the woman I'm with, how she behaves, how she reacts to that, and it's quite interesting, right? Because you could tell she's not used to that. You could tell, like, it's almost like how dare you, but at the same time she's intrigued, right? She's intrigued, and also that just makes you better at socializing, right? It makes you better at socializing, makes you and also it's kind of like to her, it shows her that you can interact with people, even if she feels the type of way about it. It shows her that you can interact with people and stuff like that, right? So yep. But I think a big part of that is really it stems from focusing on you rather than the other person, right? Focusing on you and what you want and what you're trying to get.
Excellent. That is the shout out Rollo Tomasi, mental point of origin. But definitely, because what it strikes in my head is that character thing that I mentioned, right? So if you know this character that is all about themselves in whatever kind of a healthy way that you're playing, then you just kind of go with that character. Again, if you're a psycho like me, but I think that I'm agreeing with what you're saying in that regard there, that you're making it about you and you are indeed demonstrating prowess. Okay, right? Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to add one final thing, and there's actually practical aspects to this. The final thing is, it just kind of connects with your less is more, overall outline is, leave room for mystery, right? And then I'll give you a real practical example of this, right? Texting, right? It's really hard to communicate tone and emotion and all these things, right, via texting, right? And so some people view that as a downside. I actually said, like, as a con, I actually see that as a pro in a lot of cases. Again, this may sound horrible, but a lot of cases, like, and so, like, for example, one of the things I used to do a lot is I used to use emojis a lot when I'm, texting and stuff like that. Now I've completely, I do use like some emojis, but I completely stopped using emojis, right? And there's a practical reason for this, because it leaves more mystery. Like, a lot of times, you add the LOL or you add the smiley face because you don't want her to get offended, or you don't want, but I want her to wonder what does he actually mean by this, right? Like, I actually want that. And so I actually don't put the emoji. And sometimes I'll even find myself putting it and then deleting it and then sending it, right? Like, because, it may sound silly, but that actually has practical effects. Again, I'm not saying this from a scientific point of view, but I'm just saying I've noticed the difference. Like,
again, I think that what you're saying is quite intuitive too, because there is when a language comes out. Well, it's not that emojis are some kind of complex kind of a language, but these symbols come out. They tend to have, beyond your point about using it in a way to, let's say, tamper down the emotional temperature of a situation, right? Beyond that, there's just before you understand what things mean, okay? And then there is a certain time when the language has become kind of stabilized and the different meanings of different things has been established amongst the group. And then now you just know that using a lot of emojis is not, does not show any kind of mastery, substance, control, right? That kind of a thing. Okay. So, for me, that was something that, I had to learn when the emojis first came out, because I would just kind of use emojis more. And then I kind of realized, oh, okay, you got to take it back. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that has been, that was a great stream. Okay. I think that, is that Kaizo?
Yep, that's Kaiser.
Okay, you dropped yourself out, or you dropped out and came back or something?
Yeah, one of my meat sandwiches gave me a call.
All right, cool. Well, everybody gave their thoughts. Everybody gave their practical admonishments, okay, vis-a-vis using Storyville, if you will. Understanding the landscape, knowing where you are, okay? Making it about you having a character, all right? Again, what we did talk about in a rather elaborate way is using her imagination. Using imagination. Yes, we're out here in Storyville talking dirty in Storyville. And there are better and less better ways. Go ahead.
Sorry, there was one point I didn't really say, but it might be better for a different conversation also another day. But one of the reasons why a lot of relationships do not end up working, and why the infamous marriage rate is 50% and 80% of it enacted by a certain group of people, is that we don't actually utilize the story properly. The issue is we don't understand the game or the system, and then we don't play it correctly. Because one of the points of this game is understanding that she's always going to want the next thing, because that's how she's designed. She's designed to be the person that can identify objects and missing functions. Without her, we would still be living in caves, because we wouldn't have felt that the wrongness of living in a cave. But for them, they notice things much more than we do. So they can see inconsistencies much easier. They're more qualitatively imbued. Meanwhile, we're more quantitatively imbued. So with this constant qualitative factor that they have, which is beneficial for survival of our species, because she has to know if the baby's sad, crying, and notice very small differences. Otherwise, we wouldn't exist. Now, the problem here is when you have a relationship across time, we are supposed to take the role, especially since when we actually got her to agree to be with us, we took the role of leadership in the sense of taking ownership of being the person that presents themselves into the game. The problem here is we don't understand that there is no arriving with relationships. There's always our responsibility or duty is to create the meta game for the next level. So that's why a lot of people say things like, well, they gave her everything, yet still end up in divorce or etc. Or I gave him the whole world. The problem is you didn't satisfy that perpetual qualitative need for something different. It doesn't have to be just moving towards the same direction of where the story was when you met her. It has to be relevant to the story that she's creating right now and always moving towards a direction. That's just how she's created. And it's actually one reason why we actually survived and did so well as a species. So yeah, that's another aspect that I guess I haven't seen many guys talk about in why things don't succeed. I actually, from my own logic, I think might be a very big reason why things don't tend to succeed.
Can I add something to this real quick? This is a very important point.
All right, Jonathan, go ahead.
So what I wanted to add is that I think what Kaiser said is on point. But the other thing I wanted to add is I think on the flip side, one of the reasons why guys get hurt, and again, I've experienced this personally, so I can speak on this, is that is a part of not focusing on themselves, right? And so if you enter a relationship or a marriage and in my case, I put all my energy in her and energy, finances, and I was emotionally, energetically, and financially stuck on her, right? And focused on her and then trying to better her. So one thing I've noticed, right? When I talk to one of the things I try to do a lot is, when I have people around me who, in corporate America, for example, very successful, whether it's businessmen or I'm talking about the VPs, the CEOs, right? I actually make friends with these people, and I actually, try a lot of times to get their perspectives on things. And one of the things I notice a lot of times when I talk to a lot of these successful men, right, who are married, by the way, is that for them, they pretty much view marriage, they may not say this publicly, but they view marriage as a transaction, right? As purely transactional, right? So in other words, they know that at the end of the day, they could get screwed, right? But at the same time, they're trying to, while it's alive and working, they're trying to capitalize off of it as much as possible. And so this is why, for me, I've been working on myself a lot in terms of, and I think that's one of the, not to get into the weeds on this, but that's one of the reasons I like Kevin Samuels in this space where he actually focuses on marriage. He actually advocates for that, he was the only guy that I saw doing that. But he actually provides that perspective, which I thought was interesting, because it's now you start seeing marriage less as this Disney, we got to spend the rest of our lives together, and more as how can she benefit my life, right? If I'm going to start a business, right? If I'm going to start a company, I'm an entrepreneur. I have an entrepreneurial background, right? And so if I want to start a company, Kevin is right that people look at you differently when you're a bachelor. They just do. And so that might be helpful that I have a wife, right? And so understanding that and making sure I get what I need out of it, then sure, if shit could hit the fan and I could lose whatever assets I have, et cetera, I could, not all of it, but I could lose some portion of it. But you could do the math on that and just see, okay, did I get a certain return from this investment, from this transaction that made it worthwhile? And what I've noticed, again, I'm not speaking scientifically, just from my conversations with a lot of these guys, is that they actually think this through. Some people may think they don't think this through because it's look at, the divorce rates and stuff like that. They actually think this shit through. They actually understand the risk they're taking, and they understand what it may mean for their resources, but they also understand the value they're getting from it while it's active. And so I just wanted to add that in terms of just, looking at it from a different perspective, because that's the perspective I'm looking at it from now, where I am now considering marriage again, but from that perspective rather than the Disney movie, if that makes sense.
100%. And Shozan, I believe you wanted to say something, but yes, I want to agree with the point that you brought up, Jonathan, not in opposition or in connection with any other points, but just to just commiserate with you in the fact that, for me, it's kind of obvious. Like what you said, it's like, okay, well, of course, the landscape. Of course, about things being transactional. I'm naturally that way, right? Naturally that way in terms of like, relationships and well, with everything. And then the risks involved, but you also perhaps maybe a little clear about the benefits, or at least your willingness to still play the game because you're just a crazy guy that likes to play, and it is one game out there to play, and so on and so on and so on and so forth. But basically, it is key that your pursuits are number one, okay? Because you're gonna lose them. Or let me put it: your potential to lose is still equal, right? Regardless, right? Regardless of whether you make it number one or you try to subordinate it to something else, like it doesn't change the chances of everything coming back and hitting you in the face. So, best thing to do is to make your pursuits, your endeavor, number one, okay? And anybody can have a different disposition about that, but I don't think that my psychological disposition stated in this way is outlandish or crazy. No, there's a segment of the population that is just that way. Now, Shozan, what were you gonna say?
Yeah, my closing words are basically this. I'm so glad someone brought up the dark side, because one of the keys we see on the dark side is enjoyment. I want to key into actually a little bit of what everybody said. Like, for instance, Jonathan brought up the whole idea of one thing that keeps you away from like the more, let's say dark pill or bluish mentality, away from that anger is accepting the way certain robots are, accepting the metagame, accepting the way the world is, but even more so, to enjoy it, because the same pictures that this particular robot has, the same pictures there, that robot's enjoying that. They're enjoying that part of you. They're enjoying that part. So we too, and also that keys into what the other brother was saying about being authentic. If you're being authentic, you can enjoy it because you're being authentic. That goes outward. The robots that dig your type of flavor naturally enjoy your natural story and your natural stuff going outward. And then you can enjoy it, and the robot can enjoy as well. But the key is enjoyment, because some dudes get down when they hear this or that, or how much money you could make, or being. The thing is to just enjoy the path and the process. And that isn't what I said as well. Enjoy the game. So my final closing is what all you brothers said, but also add the part of enjoying it. And truly enjoying the way you're doing it. So.
Well, thank you guys very much. You guys are always welcome, and it's always a pleasure. The pleasure is all mine, ladies and gentlemen. Shozan, Jonathan, and the Massage Noir, aka Ninja Scrolls, aka Kaizo the PhD.
I'm a PhD.
Kaizo is such a troll with that name. Massage Noir.
Yeah. But yeah, he was spotted. He needs to work on his camouflage. But okay, let me go ahead and put you guys off here, and then Dr. Thunder, you are being asked, I believe, to explain or perhaps contextualize solipsism. Well, solipsism is the state in extreme of just thinking that you are the only one that exists in the universe, that all reality is you and everything else is a dream. That is a kind of, at least a metaphysical projection aspect of solipsism. But the behavioral aspect is selfishness. In other words, there is a self-centeredness, right? There's a self-centeredness that is more than just narcissism. Solipsism is more like you live in a bubble. And there are certain vices that certain people are prone to, okay? EP says, new subscribe, shout out to you, shout out to you, shout out to you. The schedule is Saturday and Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, and maybe Friday. So Saturday and Sunday, Tuesday and Thursday, maybe Friday, right? These streams right around 5 p.m. Pacific, which is 8 p.m. right? So Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday and Sunday, and maybe Friday. So 5 days or maybe 4. EP was asking about that. And we were just talking about solipsism being that state. Okay. And I think it was explained, and I was just going to add something about that in general, that there are certain vices that certain people are prone to. You see, one of the vices that if you tend to be more emotional or feel emotional distress more, okay, the whole neurotic parameter on the big 5 personality thing, if you are more emotional in that regard, then one thing you need to watch out for is selfishness, because emotions, okay, are quite selfish, and they only care about putting some kind of a framework, some kind of a rationale in order to get whatever outcome they're looking for. Okay, emotions will make any kind of excuse or say any kind of thing, give any kind of reason in any kind of plane just to justify what it tends to want. So you need to understand that with emotionality comes a danger of being selfish, and you don't even know that you're selfish because a lot of times you're emotional on behalf of perhaps other people, but you still don't understand that that's just your desires about these people, right? It's because you think these people are special. That's why you're going off, but you're just still being selfish, basically. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think this was overall a successful trial and test, and we shall see what the algorithm says about it later on. Talking about using her imagination, talking about competence in a particular sensual aesthetic endeavor. Yes, talking dirty in Storyville, ladies and gentlemen, and understanding that basically the machinery, her imagination has a mechanism, a rationale, a logic in and of itself and of its own, and you cannot understand it. It is more like a vehicle that you're picking up the keys to turn, okay? Finding the keys. So it's more of a coaxing. It is more of a less is more approach. It is more of a finding a ways to solicit and elicit the participation, painting, borders, sketches, asking rhetorical questions to invite the filling in, having certain storylines, and so on and so forth, using brevity and boldness, and that this is a active endeavor, not to be confused with something soft like seduction, which I think is more of the feminine art. Dream weaving is not seduction. It is way more active than that. But it's a controlled surgery where you're not trying to go into the canvas, because you cannot produce the gems that you need, the spells that you need. Spells being images in their head that go along with feelings in their body. They need to be the ones that create that. Anybody that you're trying to influence, communicate with, so on and so forth. And then you can pick that and you can move it around. These same things apply whether you're trying to close a deal, overcome an objection to sell typewriters, or you're using her imagination, her sensuality, eliciting emotions, thoughts, feelings, allowing the engine to run. Ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. So I think that this was a very good foil for really understanding, and a kind of good capstone to yesterday's stream, which was about overcoming objections, where we talked about objections being like a ball of wax that you are a heated lamp to melt away. It is not a lock to pick. There are lock pickings and verbal jujitsu games. Okay, maybe closing a deal is more like that. Arguing in the Supreme Court case is more like that, right in front of the Supreme Court. But Overcoming objections is not like that. It is more like melting wax away and understanding that the objections really are in inertia, maybe, okay, or not really having a clear confidence about the future that you're trying to sell them into. You're trying to sell them into changing software. They don't want to change. They don't want to change anything. This is true of everybody. You're trying to change the internet provider or something. No, they don't want to change. And also, they're not so confident about that future, the barriers to entry, all that kind of stuff. So basically melting that away. And then somebody asked in the chat about women. And then I said, okay, great. This would be a good way to really understand how the Storyville really works. Understanding, because I think this helps to focus the mind. So that we can see from a high level and a low level, the general truths, if you will, or at least the framework that undergirds how we approach persuasion, influencing, dream weaving, and so on and so forth. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you guys very much for showing up again. Third stream out here in Los Angeles, and I think this will be the last stream in Los Angeles. And as I mentioned, the schedule is Tuesday. So I'll see you on Tuesday, and I'll see you on Thursday. Okay. And then definitely Saturday and Sunday. Okay. So around 5 p.m. And let me announce, okay, and you will be seeing flyers and all kinds of news flashes and press releases about the new show featuring, okay, Dr. Thunder and myself once a month. Okay, once a month. So watch for the press releases, okay? Once a month we're going to be, and that begins in this month, which will be the last week of each month. And as I said, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, the last week of each month, myself and Dr. Thunder will be doing a regular stream. We'll be breaking things down. Dr. Thunder is our other resident PhD, you know. Our other resident PhD in the house. So, ladies and gentlemen, what shall I say to the gentlemen out there? Yeah, you can step up your meat and potatoes game. You can get into the aesthetic arts, the dark arts of dream weaving and Storyville, using her imagination, because it is part of that whole sensual dance in the intimate relationship between men and women. And the same principles with which we go out there, influence, persuade, and so on, and so on, and so on, apply. And it's a great game. It's a beautiful game, ladies and gentlemen. Even if you're not some crazy hedonist like myself, a crazy worshiper of aesthetics, we can at least, believe. We can at least have faith in some better meat and potatoes. Ladies and gentlemen, one more time, it's been real out here in Los Angeles. By next show, we'll be back at home base, San Francisco Bay. It's been great. I love that intersection over there. Good times at that intersection. And as per usual, ladies and gentlemen, we shall close ourselves out by ever being true to the battle within. Peace.
On the shore, relentless in the war, the lead allegiance in our hearts, shed what us in our balls. The spirit and the flesh, the emotions that arrest. The cerebral will contest, propelling the unrest. Preachers and bandits with means underhanded. The teachers pedantic and lack understanding. So sweep out the sand with the broom in your hand. Stand up, make we burn Babylon. Guess I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Cause I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. With the semblance of a blaze, with gratitude and rage, we touch another page with delirious delight, impervious to light. This vitality and might encourages the flight. Preachers and bandits with means underhanded, the teachers pedantic and lack understanding. So sweep out the sand with the broom in your hand. Stand up, make we burn Babylon. Guess I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Guess I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Cause I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within.